You are watching Co-op for Two. This is your quick before you buy it video for Dune House Secrets. What is it, who is it for, and what went wrong? Stay tuned to find out. Dune House Secrets is an app-based narrative story game. Over a campaign spanning 4 connected games, players choose which story cards to read as they unravel a mystery and flesh out a story set in Frank Herbert's science fiction Dune universe. It was published in 2021 by Portal Games, a Polish board game company led by Ignacy Trzewiczek. It's an evolution of the detective modern crime board game system that has been used in several previous games. It's essentially a solo game with 1 to 4 players making joint decisions. The campaign takes place over the course of 4 games, each lasting about 2 to 3 hours. It's essentially non-replayable, and some components will get destroyed during play, making it impossible to pass along when finished. It requires an internet connection to play. Players begin the campaign by choosing which of 4 roles to play as, and which will simply accompany the players. The difference is slight. Each of the 4 roles always provides an initial set of tokens: spice, water, weapons, and subterfuge. Roles chosen by players provide the ability to change 2 of any token into 1 of their specialty token type. The campaign is divided into 4 separate games, a short prologue, and 3 main chapters. At the start of each game, players listen to an introduction provided by the website and read a sheet which contains special instructions for the chapter and provides some additional background information, as well as a list of initial encounter cards available to read. During each game, players will have a limited amount of time indicated by the time track, which is depleted with each encounter story card the players choose to read. Drawing and reading encounter cards will often reference additional encounter cards, providing a growing pool of potential leads the players may choose from. Deciding which encounter cards to read and in what order is the primary game decision faced by players. Choosing some encounter cards will require players to spend specific tokens from a shared pool or draw from a set of consequence tokens. Consequence tokens represent a push-your-luck element. Slightly more than 50% of the time, players will draw a red consequence token, which causes the decrease of the consequence track, and reduces the amount of experience points players will have available to spend on upgrades at the end of the chapter. If the consequence track reaches the end position, a special story narrative is triggered. Some encounter cards may also direct players to the app to watch a short video that provides a piece of evidence or some historical background information. At the end of each game, when players run out of time, they will return to the app to answer a multiple-choice question. Players may be asked to recommend a course of action to their superior or indicate some topic on which they would like more information. They then read a short epilogue to the chapter story, which is somewhat customized based on the answer they have chosen. Before starting the next game, players may use any experience gained from the consequence track to buy upgrade stickers. Upgrade stickers mostly provide additional tokens, but can also provide additional time or change the odds of drawing consequence tokens. Okay, so let's just rip the band-aid off early and start with the punchline. I have a hard time imagining who I could recommend this game to. It's not going to be for fans of mystery games. There's just not enough there for that. It's really not going to be for people who want an engaging fantasy or sci-fi story. It's just not interesting enough there. It's probably going to be overwhelming and unengaging for those completely unfamiliar with the Dune universe. But it's also going to probably be a letdown for the super fans of Dune who are hoping to be immersed in the thematic world. You're there, but it feels pretty generic. It does seem like one of the root problems here is that Dune House Secrets is trying to be a little bit of everything. It's trying to be a little bit mystery. It's trying to be a sort of on-rails adventure story and a multimedia experience, and then a little push-your-luck strategy game thrown in there. But compared to the previous iterations of the system, Detective Modern Crime Board Game and Vienna Connection, it seems to me to be taking steps backwards in almost every aspect, while at the same time feeling thinner, shallower, shorter, stingier, skimpier than the previous games. Let's start with the strategic gamey elements. There's the use of these tokens to pay for reading certain encounter cards. That's the real only decision you make in this game, is what subset of encounter cards to look at given you have a short amount of time. The original detective modern crime board game did make use of tokens like this, and I felt it was a positive evolution to get away from that. And they did seem to get away from that, both with the Season 1 evolution of Detective and Vienna Connection. There's no real predicting what tokens you're going to need for any given encounter card. Not only can you not predict it across the timescale of a chapter, but you can't even look at a card and have any idea of what it's going to need. That means all of these decisions about what tokens to collect and when to turn over a card are essentially random rolls of the dice. You really can't use any logic or intuition even to guess what you're going to need. So they're at best annoyances, frustrations, things you worry about having enough of. In Detective, at least, those concerns sort of were grounded. Here you have too many tokens, and yet the game is forcing you to play as if they were a precious resource. There's also this additional push your luck drawing of consequence tokens. And again, you have no idea how valuable they're going to be, how impactful making mistakes drawing from the board. And again, it's a toss of the coin, and it doesn't seem meaningful at all. It's just an annoyance. And it's odd that it looked like they were making a good move away from this kind of additional busy work, and now they've brought it all back in full for Dune. There is one addition to the system, this upgrade idea that you can put stickers on cards to give you new powers, but after playing the game, it seems clear that these are fairly useless, fairly meaningless. You can't decide on them based on any logic. So again, they're just busy work, and they make the game impossible to pass along because you've consumed and put stickers on things, so you can't even anymore sell, trade, or give away the game. Okay, that's the gamey elements. Now let's talk about the storyline a little bit. So it's got minimal mystery elements, occasional moments of intrigue, but it almost feels like it was specifically designed to make you not care about anything or anyone. Everyone feels like bit characters. You feel like a bit character. You're flooded with dozens and dozens of odd names that are hard to keep track of and are not important to keep track of. So flooded with the avalanche of forgettable people. In addition to those little details, the whole entire pacing and arc of the game feels off. It feels as if maybe there was another story here, another larger, more put together plot line, storyline, because everything feels off. The plots within chapters feel off, and the entire arc of the entire story feels off. Sometimes you're in a little side quest that takes up half the game. It's very odd and not very satisfying. Okay, now let's talk about the sort of key end chapter. So there's 3.5 chapters. And in each chapter, you're presented with a single question, a single multiple choice question, and then told a little epilogue story about how the chapter wraps up, and it's supposed to take into account your answer to this question. Now, the original Detective Modern Crime board game used what's fairly standard in these mystery games, which was a quiz that asked you a couple questions based judging how well you understood the mystery, how well if you solved it or not, and then gave you a score. Vienna Connection, this sort of evolved game from Detective, tried something quite bold and interesting. It was a real mystery that you were trying to figure out, but rather than quiz you on how well you understood the mystery, it asked you questions that were sort of based on how well you understood it, like what other what other little threads you'd like to wrap up and investigate. And it had a sense of purpose to answering those. If you understood the mysteries or some of the mysteries well enough that you were curious how things would wrap up, you could choose how to wrap those things up or which people to follow or investigate. And some of them did depend on sort of a right or wrong interpretation of the mystery. Dune goes in a totally different direction. There's one question at the end of each chapter. The questions seemed either totally divorced from the chapter you had just played, or completely inconsequential, or downright odd in terms of asking you a question like, did you solve this? Yes or no? And then no matter what you pick, if you say yes, it says yes, you figured out A, B, or C. Whether you did or not doesn't matter. And they're not psychologically interesting. They're not based on any moral decisions. They just feel like throwaways. In fact, one of them is just like, I don't even want, one of the options are like, I don't even care. Just give me some experience or give me some tokens. Very odd. It feels like you've played this whole chapter. You're waiting to get this little dose of excitement to hear how the story ends, and you're hoping maybe you're going to watch some animation based on what you decide to do or what you did. It's just nothing. It's like a paragraph with 1 or 2 sentences based on how you answered. And the final chapter, the sort of wrap up, you would think maybe some really exciting payoff to playing this whole game, introduces a change of rules in the game, and then you get to the end and you feel like you're being trolled by the designers. Like you're looking for where's the hidden envelope that's going to tell you the real end of the game, the real last part of this puzzle that's going to make it all make sense and be satisfying. But it's not there. Okay, so to summarize, Vienna Connection, the evolution of this system is fascinating to watch. And it is a very interesting trajectory to see what gets added and changed. But where Vienna Connection felt like a breath of fresh air into this genre and an exciting evolution of this system filled with interesting documents to pour through and study and very thinky and engaging, Dune House Secrets feels like half of a game and all the bad parts. It feels unfinished. Again, it feels stingy in content, like there's very little in this box. They've announced they're going to make, this is the first of a trilogy of Dune House Secrets games, and it feels like they maybe took a third of a game and put it in here. It feels like a step backwards, a real step backwards in this system. And I have a hard time imagining anyone to recommend it to. I would urge folks who might be interested in this system, if they haven't played Detective or Vienna Connection, to start with Vienna Connection. Leave this for last if you love the systems and you're curious about it from a design perspective. I do hope, I've sort of been as negative about this game as I was positive about Vienna Connection and Detective. I do hope with 2 more boxes of this planned that the game designers will step back, take a break. They don't have to meet the deadline of the movie anymore for their IP use. I hope they'll take a step back and consider some of these criticisms. Having said all that, it's not uncommon especially for fans of this genre, to have very different takes on different cases and different mysteries, depending on what paths you followed and how close your thinking aligned with the designers. You might have a much better or much worse experience. These are just my thoughts, so I would urge you to seek out additional reviews before you take my word for any of this, and before you assume you're going to have the same experience I had. You can also watch if you decide not to play it, or if you want to watch a little bit of a playthrough before you decide. You can watch the prologue game and all 3 chapters. I played them all solo and live on YouTube. You could watch those to see if you think you might like it, or you could watch them after you play the game to get second opinion. Those playthroughs are also filled with much, much longer discussion and critique of the game system, the problems. I saw some suggestions for how some of those issues might be fixed from a game design perspective. so you could watch those. There's hours of commentary in there and my first impressions. I may excerpt them into a separate longer review video. And that's it. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news here, but again, don't take my word for it. Check out other reviews. BGG Forum is bound to have a bunch of them. And I'll see you next time.